welcome to The Acorn, the podcast that drops a little bit of psychoeducation so you can gain a better understanding of the therapy world and yourself. So without further ado, let's jump into our episode. Welcome to Season 1, Episode 12 of The Acorn. This is part 2 of our episode on the importance of attachment. There's a lot of information here, so I'm going to jump right in. So the first insecure attachment style that we're going to talk about today is avoidant attachment. And that can come about in several ways. One way is where caregivers don't tolerate, and even if they show disapproval, of a child's full range of emotions. In some families, there's an unspoken rule. It's covert and kids really internalize it, where you're not allowed to show anger. For other families, you're not allowed to show sadness. In other families yet, you're not allowed to show exuberance, excitement, happiness, pride. Some people call it like the tall poppy syndrome. If you show pride in something, then we need to cut you down to size. And so just understanding your family rules, especially the unspoken rules, is super helpful here. So kids are not allowed to show their full range of emotions. This is challenging for them. Another way this attachment style can happen is when caregivers are neglectful or abusive towards the child. And so these kids, they grow up preferring more independence. You'll hear, they're able to function so well on their own. But kids aren't meant to. They're meant to be able to have a secure base that they keep coming back to, checking in, we're good, and then they go off into the world and they're independent there. But they have to be able to have that choice, that opportunity to come back and forth. But these kids who are experiencing caregivers who are neglectful or abusive, they have a hard time trusting other people. And I'm sure you can understand that this makes sense. They prefer to self-soothe rather than rely on other people for emotional support and care. And the result is that they tend to let friends and partners into a more surface relationship with them. They have internal parts that put up a protective barrier, and it's hard to take down those barriers, even when friends and partners indicate that they want a deeper and more intimate connection. Another insecure attachment style is called disorganized attachment style. And this comes about when the caregiver, who should be safe, is actually a source of fear. When a child witnesses a caregiver abusing someone else, or the child is the victim of any form of abuse from the caregiver, the child realizes that the caregiver is an unreliable source of safety. So as kids, they want closeness, but because of that fear, they distance themselves from the caregiver. Their nervous system is trying to protect them from the danger, and the danger is actually in the form of the person who should be their secure attachment figure. So the results of this kind of parenting is a child who really desperately wants to love and be loved, and yet they're terrified of being hurt. So later on in friendships and their partnerships, you find that people with a disorganized attachment style, they're so afraid of hurt or being rejected or being abandoned or being disappointed, they sometimes engage in behaviors that can actually self-sabotage their relationships. And then that reinforces their belief that they can't trust other people. So all of this can feel like pretty heavy news, but I want you to recognize that for those with an insecure attachment style, there's actually good news here, because you can develop something called an earned secure attachment style. So these people are able to recognize their adverse childhood experiences, and they're able to make the decision to become an intergenerational cycle breaker. They're able to get into healthy relationships with surrogate attachment figures who then become like a secure base for them. So this could be a friend, a family member. For those who are more spiritual, it could be God. For others, it could be a mentor, a therapist, or even their significant other. Now, this process can take a while, but it's worth it. We were all meant to experience love and emotional support. This is hard work, I know it is, but it's also worthy work. So I'm not certain who needs to hear this, but maybe it's time to make sense of your past and begin to create space for self-compassion and healing in your life. Well, that was part 2 of this topic on the importance of attachment. And now, as we close out this episode, remember to take a moment in your day to pause, breathe, hope, and heal. Take care. Well, this has been another episode of The Acorn. Remember, the content in these podcast episodes are for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. Disclaimer. Anything said in this podcast should not be considered as treatment, professional consultation, advice, clinical instruction or assessment, or any other mental health replacement. Listening to this podcast does not create a therapist-client relationship between you and the podcast host. Always seek the advice of your own mental health provider regarding any questions or concerns you may have about your mental health needs. Also, if you need immediate help, contact your mental health provider or call 911.